Hello, everybody. I hope that my audio is working. I hope that this is going right because I've been having some issues lately, but I'm super excited about this episode. We're going to start on Ezekiel, and I think that it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're kind of sort of go verse by verse, but not really verse by verse. We're going to talk about some concepts in here. When a lot of people talk about Ezekiel, they're talking about the visions that he had of the angelic beings. They're talking about the angels. They're talking about the cherubs, the wheels, and there's this very mysterious quality to that. There's something interesting about it that draws us. It's like, what is this, right? Like, who is this person that's seeing these things? Why did he get to see them? And what is it that he's seeing? What does this represent in terms of the underlying structure of reality? Like, what is this spiritual world where there's these kind of abstract beings that are real, and they're doing things and we don't understand them, and they're not explained? That's the other thing too. I kind of lean towards the idea that there's some sort of tradition around this, because back in Exodus, when they were building the tabernacle, the instruction was put the cherubs on the ark, and it's not really explained what they are, so it's kind of like implied that they knew what this was. That's my interpretation anyway. I'm not actually going to talk about the vision a whole lot. I'll go into it a little bit, but basically what happened is that Ezekiel had this vision that God spoke to him, and there were these angelic beings there, and they're very strange, they're very abstract, they're very different. And a lot of times people in the New Age spiritual community, especially, they look at this event and they put all their focus on that vision, and they're like, oh, it's this visionary experience, it's this thing that fits in with my worldview, right? And they talk about this vision and they ignore the rest of the book, right? They take it out of context. They only look at that one particular time, which is very ironic, because Ezekiel is, if they read it, they would be very offended, because it's basically saying, stop being degenerate. You're about to be destroyed. I've let this go on long enough, and I'm about to tear you apart. Please turn away and stop worshiping idols. And that's exactly what this community is doing. And it's so interesting that they take the book that's all the prophets really, that are like, stop worshiping idols, stop engaging in debauchery, stop being pagan, stop putting all of your attention on things of this world and allowing yourself to spiral out endlessly into chaos. And they look at it like, that's what this book's about. And look at it and they say, they integrate the one part of it that fits with their worldview, and they ignore the rest of it. It's so baffling to me. But we're going to start talking about it. So God comes and speaks to Ezekiel. He gives him some instructions, and the opening to that is these the living beasts, the vision of the living beings. Excuse me, I don't think beast is the right word, but we're going to start going through some verses. We're going to talk about it. This is probably my favorite verse in the Bible. This is Ezekiel 3:7 through 11. He says, this is God speaking to him, but the people of Israel won't listen to you any more than they listen to me. For the whole lot of them are hard-hearted and stubborn. But look, I have made you as obstinate and hard-hearted as they are. I have made your forehead as hard as the hardest rock. So don't be afraid of them or fear their angry looks, even though they are rebels. Then he added, Son of man, let all my words sink deep into your heart first. Listen to them carefully for yourself, then go to your people and exile and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Do this, whether they listen to you or not. My favorite verse. It's awesome. I feel like I relate to that. I think that we get frustrated in the world. We get really beaten down sometimes, because we see all this stuff out there in the modern world, all this culture, all these movies, all these podcasts, all these quote influencers, and they seem to have this like, they seem to be getting all the attention, to be garnering all the favor, and they're very outspoken. They're loudmouths. A lot of them. They're very rambunctious. They're obnoxious, right? And they get all this attention. They get all this influence because of it, because they can captivate attention. That's the real thing, is that they can hold somebody's interest, right? And they're talking about like shallow stuff. They're talking about things that don't matter. They're things that are just not true. It's like, why are they holding people's attention? Because that's who resonate. That's what people resonate. That's what people who want to engage in that same debaucherous behavior want to hear. They want to be angry. They want to be justified in doing whatever it is they want. And I think that it's important to understand that we all have our different gifts. Now, for me, I am a bit of a rebel. I am very hard-headed. I'm stubborn. Like if I fixate on something, I will argue with people endlessly. I've been engaged in many long arguments on the internet as of late, and with real people about things that I care about. I don't care. I don't care if people disagree with me. I don't care if it offends people. I try to be tactful. I try to be nice, but you have to get to the point where you understand that there's a difference between what's right and wrong. Yes, you need to be respectful of everybody, but at the same time, if you know that something is hurting somebody and you have the means of communicating it, you kind of have an obligation to do that. And so he talks about this in Ezekiel too. I didn't underline it for some reason. I don't know why, but he basically says, look, I'm giving you this message. You need to go communicate it to the people. If you do so and they don't repent, they don't turn around and stop doing what they're doing, I'm going to destroy them. If you have told them ahead of time, I'm going to destroy them, then it's on them. You're good. You're free and clear. If I tell you this stuff and you don't say it to them because you're scared, right? Because think about it, like you're going into, it's like you're going into the lion's den and saying, stop doing this, right? The people that are willing to kill and murder, the people that are doing all this disgusting, degenerate stuff, you're going and arguing with them. And it's easy to look at it in the context of high sense, like, oh, you probably just yelled on the street corner. Like, well, would you want to go confront people that are in the, like, would you want to go into an adult entertainment club, for example, and sit there and like yell at people and so like, stop doing this, repent, you're going to burn. If you don't, like, you would look crazy, would you not? But if God told you to do it, you've got to go be crazy. And so he's saying, look, you have an obligation to say this, because if you don't communicate this message and they persist, I'm still going to destroy them, but it's on you, because you didn't give them the message. So there's a sense of obligation. I don't think that everybody's called to be a prophet. I don't think everybody's called to like go and like that's their purpose. But there is a certain amount of like, well, listen, people, like you've been given something. You've been given these gifts and you're meant to use them. If you don't, then you are responsible for the missed potential, for the things that you could have done but did not. And that's not a situation that you want to be in. Like we're already imperfect. Don't add on to that. Don't add more judgment on yourself. That's a horrible feeling, right? Like you get to the end of your life and think, I could have done a lot more. I know that I could have done a lot more and I didn't. You don't want that. So we're going to talk a little bit more. And I was reading this book thinking, oh my goodness, when I was a kid reading the prophets, I thought, this has to be exaggerated. Like, this isn't true. Like it is, it's the Bible, but it's like, he's being dramatic. Like he's exaggerating. He's being colorful. It's poetry. There's no way that people do this stuff. And then I reread it this last couple of weeks and I'm like, oh, like people absolutely do all this stuff. It's just degenerates. Like this is what people do. This is why God flooded the world the first time. You look around our society now, you see, oh, well, how far do you let this spiral out? How far do you let this go before somebody stands up and says, that's it, we're kill switch, like we got to start over, like fire and brimstone kind of deal. Because, and this takes us back to the early church fathers, there's this idea from, scripture that we live in a fallen world. And because of that, there's a certain sense of fundamental corruption here. And people look at pain as being a bad thing, and it's certainly an unpleasant thing, but is discipline a bad thing? Well, no, discipline is not a bad thing, but how does discipline work? Well, with pain. And so when in Genesis, when he talks about being, casting them out of the garden, and there's going to be pain and thorn and toils and everything, there's also a sense of like, that is a boundary. That's a good thing, because if you don't have that boundary, then you just kind of spiral out. Like there's nothing to stop you from just perpetually engaging in your whims and, the impulses that just pop up in your mind. There's nothing to take your attention off of the here and now, off of the material stuff, and put it back towards God. If there's no death, if there's no pain, then we would never turn our eyes from the earth to heaven. We would be stuck forever, right? But because we are very painfully aware of the fact that we are going to die one day, and also there's a recoil. If we do drugs, we get sick, we get addicted. It has a detrimental effect on our health. And so we have an incentive to not do drugs endlessly. If that wasn't there and we could just stay high forever, what would we do? We would be high forever and nothing would get done, right? But it wouldn't matter because we don't feel pain and nothing bad happens to us. So pain is a good thing. Consequences are a good thing. Discipline is a good thing. There's some cool symbolism in this next part that I want to talk about. So God is talking to him about, go call out the priests, go call out the people on the idolatry in the temple, on the mixing of these other gods with, my sacred space. And I think that this is a very interesting thing to talk about. I'll do an episode on idols soon, but I want to focus on some other stuff here. So I'm going to read this. It says, I didn't underline the whole thing. Then the Spirit lifted me up into the sky and transported me to Jerusalem in a vision from God. I was taken to the north gate of the inner courtyard of the temple, where there is a large idol that has made the Lord very jealous. Let's skip a little bit. He says, Son of man, look towards the north. So I looked, and there to the north, beside the entrance to the gate near the altar, stood the idol that had made the Lord so jealous. So let's kind of pick at this a little bit. Why is it in the north? First of all, does anybody know what the north symbolizes in, or what it represents in cosmic symbolism? If you do not, it's fine. But I learned this knocking doors for solar. Go door-to-door sales, you look for certain roofs that face a certain way. If you have a south-facing roof, that's good because solar panels on that roof are going to work pretty well. If you only have a north-facing roof, not so good. Why? Because the north is the only cardinal direction that the sun never enters. So if you only have a north-facing roof, well, you're not going to get a lot of sunlight, right? And so in symbolic terms, what does this mean? Well, the north is symbolic of darkness. It's the region that the sun never enters. I think it's Isaiah, he talks about it might be the king of Babylon, rising up and taking his throne in the seat of the north. Why? Well, that symbolizes you're walking in darkness. You're not walking in the light. You're getting as far away as you can from anything to do with truth, with a higher aspirations. You are placing yourself in a situation that is, how do I say this? You're allowing yourself to be consumed by darkness, which is illusion, right? Like the darkness can't stop you from doing anything, but it can conceal what you need to do. It can conceal the good stuff around you. And so you can't find it, right? You become confused when you lie to yourself, when you experience something like cognitive dissonance, when you lie and say, no, like I don't actually skip the gym that much. When you skip the gym all the time, you get uncomfortable. And then somebody asks you in the future, like, how often have you worked out this month? And you can't remember because you've lied to yourself, because you don't know what's going on, because you have surrounded yourself in darkness. You exist in illusion. So when it talks about the north gate, or excuse me, when the idol being placed in the north of the temple, I'm not saying that this is the only interpretation of that, but I think that there's something interesting there in the fact that that's the place of darkness. That is the place that you have turned your eye away from. There is a lack of perception. There's a certain amount of confusion. You're not illuminating that particular part of the temple, which is representative of other things. It's representative of yourself, right? Of society. It's a pattern. It's not just that building. It's not just that there is a statue in the building. It's that you have placed something inside of your life that is taking up attention, that is distracting your attention away from God. And that leads you into darkness because God is truth. So if you're not moving towards truth, you're moving towards untruth, which is lies, illusion, delusion. Okay. And so why is it in the north? Well, I think that there's something to be said about these are the things that you allow to slide. These are the things that you don't look at and say, you know what, this is wrong, I'm not going to do it. It's stuff that you're like, well, it's the times have changed, or it's not that big of a deal, and stuff like that. I think that it's the little things that you make excuses for, and they start to gain a foothold in your mind, in your life, in your culture, right? Like you see the nonsense that's going on in this day and age with this crazy degenerate stuff. And people have just accepted it because it's like the frog in water. Like they've just slowly heated up. They haven't noticed that they're boiling. It's like, well, when you put an idol, when you put your attention and your worship on something that is shadowy and you can't quite perceive it, and you're not willing to shine a light on it, well, that's what happens, is you become slowly led astray. And what is the idol? It's something that takes your attention off of God. You worship something that's created versus something that's versus the creator. That's exactly the same as worshiping the waves and the wind of the storm versus looking at Christ and saying, I'm going to walk on water with you, because you transcend this. It's putting all of your attention on the stuff that doesn't matter, because it seems more immediate. It seems more oppressive. It seems like it's getting to you. Okay. And then they talk about putting the mark on the foreheads of all who weep and sigh because of the detestable sins being committed in their city. And basically everybody that doesn't have this mark gets slaughtered. So they're living in this debaucherous city. They're living in this state that has become prideful, that has started to worship pleasure, that has started to indulge in all of their inclinations and fantasies. And so God has the people who weep and cry over this, the ones that are disturbed by it and don't want anything to do with it, don't partake in it. He marks them for protection and kills everybody else. Now, I think it's cool that the way he does it is that he sends it, the angels go out and they do it symbolically. Like they strike everyone down. Now, what actually happened to Jerusalem, it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen all at once. Those people did die, but it wasn't immediate. There's something really cool in the fact that he had this vision of like, this is what's going to happen. This is the archetypal pattern. This is the thing that happens before it happens, right? On the spiritual level, what happens is we take the sword to everybody. And then what in reality transpires is that, there's this series of plagues and, invasions and all this other stuff. And it's been a while since I've looked into the history of this, but from what I remember, it was a pretty crazy time for them. Definitely. And it's coming again, because we are like, if you read through this book, it's exactly what we're doing here in the West. It's exactly what America is doing. And to think that we can just get away with this forever. It's like, oh, but Jesus came and, forgave everybody. It's like, yes, but there still has to be that discipline, because here's probably the biggest takeaway for me anyway. And we're going to wrap it up with this. Actually, we're going to keep going with Ezekiel. I actually got a lot more. But what I want to say about this, if there's no consequences in life, and this is where people get it confused, because they think that, well, Old Testament doesn't happen anymore. That was all wrathful. That was all anger. Why does God get angry? Why does God get jealous? He doesn't experience the emotion the same way we do. If I get jealous of somebody, like if my girlfriend's talking to somebody else and I get jealous, that's a human emotion, right? That's because I have ego involved. It's because I don't want to lose her. It's because I feel protective, whatever. When God gets jealous, it's different. He's not controlled by an emotion. He is manifesting the essence of that thing, right? Like he is the infinite creator. He has created everything. So like when he's angry and wrathful, it's not because he's lost control and he has a bad temper. That's not what it is. He is expressing the raw, true essence of anger. And what is that? Well, it's anger is something that makes us act, right? It's something that makes us move. It's an initiator of action. And so if you, for example, you have certain instincts, you have fear. Fear is an instinct that keeps us alive sometimes because we are afraid of things that could hurt us. That means that we don't engage with those activities, which means that we are a little bit less likely to kill ourselves because we're dumb. I don't want to jump off the bridge. I'm afraid. I'm nervous. Therefore, I don't do it. Whereas somebody that doesn't feel fear jumps off the bridge. Maybe they're fine that time, but then they jump off the next bridge and they die. Like, fear is a good thing, but fear can be detrimental, right? If I am in a situation where my family and myself are being threatened by dangerous people, and they're like, they want to take our food, they want to kill us, they want to do bad stuff to us, and I'm just afraid, and that's the dominant emotion, what am I going to do? Nothing, because I'm afraid, right? So anger takes over. Anger is in the right context is a useful thing. I'm not saying anger is good, because it's typically not used well, but in the right moment in a survival situation, it is good, because it gets you to act, and it mitigates all the fear. Like, you suddenly don't care about yourself anymore. You don't care if you get hurt. It's like, look, listen, there's something greater here. You're threatening my family? Absolutely not. I'm mad, right? I'm willing to get hurt now. I don't care if there's more people, if there's more of you than there are of me. I'm going to act. I'm going to do something about it. You can cut me up. You can beat me up. It's fine. I'm taking you out, right? Like, it gets you to move. It makes you do something. And so compare that to the fact that God is very patient with us. He's very merciful. He wants to be merciful to us. He wants to be good to us. He doesn't want to hurt us, right? However, there comes a point where we are so hopelessly engaged in our downward spiral that we're not pulling out. He's told us again and again, please stop doing this. It's bad for us, right? Like, why is God jealous? It's bad for us. He wants us to attain union with him. He wants us to put our eyes on him, because that is what is good for us. It brings us back. If we take our eyes off and put our focus on worldly things, then that's who we become. We lose out on that relationship. It's not good for us. And so when he becomes angry and wrathful, it's like, look, I have to do this. You've made me take action. And so I am initiating that action. If he doesn't do this, then we spiral out endlessly. And so I think that this is a misconception where people look at the New Testament and say, oh, well, God doesn't do that anymore. Not true at all. Not even a little bit true. And here's the big thing. If he was to not act, what would happen? Like, really think about it. Look at what's happening in the West now. Look at the world in general, but look at what's happening. You've got all these people who are doing whatever they want. If there's no consequences for that, well, then what's the point of not doing it? Why not, think that I can engage in this behavior? Why not think that I can partake of their debauchery? Why not, have life-altering surgeries to myself because I feel like it today and I might change tomorrow? Why not oppress people? Why not do whatever? It's like, if there's no consequences for that, then at some point, nobody's going to come to God, because they're going to look and say, well, the people that are following God are losing this battle. Like, look what everybody else is doing, and then nothing that bad ever happens to them. Now, that seems to be the case for a time, because our perception is such that it seems that people are getting ahead when they cheat, they lie, cheat, and steal, whatever. And in the short term, they do. However, when it's generations, when it's cultural, then it starts to tell people, well, we can get away with anything, so we can do whatever we want. And then people start to pervert the church, for example. They start to bring this debauchery into the church. And I always thought that will never happen. That had to have been a specific thing to the Old Testament, until you look around now and you see it happening on a daily basis. You see these churches that are embracing modern culture. They've got the rainbow flags in their church. They've got they're playing Beyonce in their chapel. Like, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think God doesn't still get jealous? If you allow that to go on for long enough, what happens is those people start to misuse the name of God. They start to preach things. They start to teach things that are not true. And it keeps people from coming to God. It keeps people away from that, because it's like, well, you're just like everybody else. There's no separation between you and the rest of the world. This church is like all into the new age spirituality stuff. It's like, oh, well, you guys read tarot cards in your church. Like, it's like, that seems like a stretch, or at least to me anyway, but like, not in this day and age anymore. So I think that is the true meaning of the commandment, do not you do not carry the name of the Lord in vain. Because when you do that, when you use the name of God inappropriately, and you say, like the red pill community, for example, they talk about like how they're religious. They're not religious. Like they don't act like it anyway. They don't, their actions don't match up with their words. They're like, oh yeah, God wants this, that, the other. That's why I sleep with all these girls and I, you know, curse a lot and I do all these drugs and I just party. And that's like my whole lifestyle. It's like, dude, like you're carrying the name of the Lord inappropriately. There has to be a consequence for that, because what happens is people get a false perception of that. People that don't know any better are like, I don't want to go to God, because if that's who it is, then like, why would I want to be involved in those? People are just like everyone else. Or maybe they're even like traumatic. There's a traumatic experience. Like they hurt people. They make people feel bad. They say, well, and again, red pill community, it's like, well, I cheated because that's what God wants me to do. And it's like, well, if somebody's never heard of God before and that's their only experience, and it's their only like real experience with somebody who follows or professes to follow, it's like, well, why would they want to? And so God, that's really where God gets upset and steps in and says, okay, we're done. Like, I'm, for the sake of my name, I'm not allowing this to happen. He says this over and over again. I always wondered, why does he care so much about his name? Because if he doesn't protect his name, if he doesn't protect his reputation, then nobody's going to come to him. And that means that everyone is stuck here forever. Everyone is stuck here perpetually, just doing whatever they want, engaging in debaucherous behavior, being a degenerate, and endlessly being stuck in this material state of pleasure-seeking frivolity. And it's not good for anyone, because the parameters that are set up are, hey, there's pain, there's discipline, there's consequences, so that you turn your eyes to heaven. It's not to hurt you. It's not to be a buzzkill. It's because this is not what's good for you. This is not what you were designed for, right? Like you were not designed to live in a fallen world. Adam and Eve were not put here in the way that it is now. This is not what we're supposed to be doing. This is a corrupted state of being. We are meant for more. And so God is calling us to not be like the world, to not walk the wide path, but to walk the narrow path that leads to life. And you know what? That means standing up and separating yourself from culture, separating yourself from society to some extent. And it doesn't mean that it's easy to not be engaged in the things that everyone else does. It's hard, right? But when you start making excuses, when you put the idol in the north of the temple and you just like, it's dark there, you don't have to see it, you don't have to realize that there's something there besides God that is taking up your attention, then you're screwed, because you're not willing to look at your own inadequacies. You're not willing to look at your own shortcomings, because you have idolized something, probably yourself, right? Probably the pursuit of pleasure, of feeling good. Like, what makes me feel the best? That must be right. No, it's important to be very brutally honest with yourself. You have to reflect on your priorities, on your hierarchy of values. You have to be very clear about what you will tolerate and what you will not, and you have to be unwavering in dedication to those morals and ethics. If you fail to do so, then you're weak, and weak people don't last. They are subsumed into the greater movement. They are taken advantage of. They are pushed around, and they are ultimately misled, because the world can be very persuasive. And if you are not capable of standing firm on something real and transcendent, if you're not able to take a step back and say, no, this is wrong, you're not putting an idol in the temple in any way, shape, or form, whether that's physical. And I think it was literal, but I think it also symbolizes something deeper than that. I'm not saying there wasn't an idol in the temple. I'm saying that the fact that it was presented the way it was tells me that there's also a metaphorical dimension to it, right? Because that's how everything is. There's always a literal truth, and there's always a metaphorical truth as well. That's just the nature of God's creation. So I hope that this has been interesting to you guys. I hope this has been a good starter on the Ezekiel series. I don't know how long it's going to be, because that was like 2 verses, and I think it's been 40 minutes, something like that. I don't know. I can't keep track of time. But if you guys like this, be sure to subscribe, smash that like button, share it with your friends. Thank you for listening. I'll see you soon.